I'm not going to kill you, but I'm going to tell you 3 things that are going to haunt you for the rest of your days. You ruined your father, you crippled your family, and baldness is hereditary.
It is?
Hello, and welcome to the Simpsons Countdown, the podcast where we go back to the beginning and watch all of The Simpsons to trace its creative evolution and count down, finding the exact moment in which the show began to suck. I'm your host, Erix Antoine. This week, I'm joined by Chris Prentice, also known as Moltisanti on the internets. He and I will be discussing Simpson and Delilah, which originally aired in the US on October 18, 1990. In this episode, Homer uses the nuclear power plant's medical insurance plan to buy a miracle hair growth formula called Minoxidil. This proves to be a life-changing experience in all the best ways, as now that he has a full head of hair, he begins rising up in rank, both socially and professionally, where he receives an executive promotion. He hires a secretary named Karl, voiced by Harvey Fierstein, who comes to be a kind of Capra-esque guardian angel, and Homer learns that the magic was within himself all along. And then he loses all his hair again and things go back to normal. There is a lot of wit and even more cynicism in this episode, which serves as a rather intriguing satire of the corporate world and the generally shallow nature of our social structure. And it gave Chris and I quite a bit to talk about as we observe the plight of the follically challenged in modern society. So without further ado, here we go. So welcome back, Chris. Welcome back. Here we are at season 2. How you doing?
I'm doing very good, very good. Thank you for having me once again.
Yes, well, it's always a pleasure. And we are here speaking about the episode Simpson and Delilah.
Another very clever play on words, as they are one to do.
On the one hand, it's a parody of the whole hair growth industry, which sort of this was its big boom. The early 90s is when it had been around for a while. You know, the whole miracle hair thing had been around for a while. But this parodies one specific aspect of it, whereas before the whole miracle drug thing, you know, that I think that's what started happening more prominently toward the late 80s, early 90s, because before that it was just Hair Club for Men. And then after that you had this.
We recently lost the founder of the Hair Club for Men, Cy Sperling. He checked out not long ago.
I'm Cy Sperling, president of Hair Club for Men. Just call our toll-free number now. And remember, I'm not only the Hair Club president, but I'm also a client.
Yeah, that was that you're right that kind of the late 80s, early 90s. I assume baldness has been a problem forever, but it really seemed to really kind of be something that everyone felt the need to try to tackle head on at that point. And I don't know, I think the greatest, or I don't know if you want to call it the greatest or most infamous innovation from around that time was the Ronco hair in a can. I don't know if you remember that. It was like a spray that basically these guys were pouring on their heads that made it look like they had a full head of hair. But
you said it. It looked good in the commercial, as I'm sure someone can attest, Steven Seagal continued to use this product well into his career, reportedly.
Yeah. I mean, if you watch Above the Law and you look at his hairline in Above the Law, and then you look at his hairline in Hard to Kill, I mean, there's something going on there.
I mean, you know what? That's what this episode's about, so we can just get right into it. So, yes, Steven Seagal has very much a John Cleese hairline in Above the Law.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. He essentially, he's this tall, lanky guy running very comically. So when you watch Above the Law, it's like watching John Cleese in an action sequence.
Nico Toscani. He's a covert agent trained to survive in Vietnam. He has a master 6-degree black belt in Aikido and family in the Mafia. One man. One obsession, one rule.
You guys think you're above the law. You ain't above mine.
John Cleese, above the law.
Yeah, and then immediately after that, he obviously has a nicer hairline. But I think initially he got plugs.
Yeah, I don't know if
I think that's what happened the first time around.
I don't think he was doing anything with the paint and or the hair in the can kind of stuff then. But yeah,
No.
certainly in the later years, yeah. I mean, when you get to like the 03, 04, it's more than just plugs. It's like, he basically whereas most men's hairline recedes, his hairline was going even further down, and there's something quite not right there.
Right above the eyebrows, pretty much. Just about.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's the whole Eddie Munster look.
Yes, exactly. That is exactly what it is, and you do that with a combination of bad hair plugs and a copious amount of Topic is the one that they advertise now. What you're talking about, hair in a can, and now they have this other thing that's very similar. It's not a spray. It's like a powder. It comes in a little tube, and it's powdery. Follically challenged people such as myself have looked into these things.
I guess so.
We have not used them, but we have looked into them. Other people like Steven Seagal have actually used them, so that's the difference.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a very, very reminiscent of Homer's plight in this episode with
Yes.
all the various hair products that he had tried.
Okay, let's get into this episode. It's a fun episode, but here's the thing. Obviously, when I first saw this episode, and in future viewings of the episode over the years, when I was a younger man and when I still had a full head of hair, it was a different thing. The episode had a different feeling. It was like, oh, this is very funny. But then when it actually happens to you, then you look back at the episode and you go, I can identify with Homer. I can sympathize with the guy. I can see where he's coming from now. I used to laugh at this when I was, 15, 16, and I had like a full head of hair. But then watch this again in my late 20s, and it's like, I kind of see where he's coming from. It kind of sucks. But
yeah. Well, I mean, that's I think kind of the power of this podcast is examining, how we looked at these episodes 30 years ago and then how we look at them today and the differences. And I can see if you're somebody who's, suffering from the same plight as Homer, that this would this episode would probably play a lot differently for you than it did back in the day.
Before we get into what are your memories of this episode, or what was your experience revisiting it, as I imagine you did recently?
Yeah, I mean, this was one that I certainly liked a ton back when it first aired. I think this is a good example of, the second season kind of opening up a bit more and kind of expanding the universe a bit more. And this was always the one that I've always kind of remembered from this one that it killed me 30 years ago and it still kills me now is after he's awoken and he has his lush full head of hair and he's running throughout the neighborhood.
Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield.
Hey, don't you get a haircut, you hippie!
Good morning, Moe's Tavern.
Hi, it's the president.
It's very funny. It's one of the funniest moments in the episode, and it reminds me very specifically. And in a sense, this whole episode reminds me of that. Have you seen the film? It was a Showtime TV movie, but Body Bags. I believe John Carpenter directed two of the segments, and Tobe Hooper directed one of the segments. And it was it's like an anthology. I think they were gonna do like a Tales from the Crypt kind of thing on Showtime. It didn't really take off, so they put 3 episodes together and made it like a movie.
I mean, I have seen that, and wasn't Carpenter sort of the pseudo crypt keeper type character in the film?
That is correct. He's a morgue attendant. He's a morgue attendant, and each of the bodies, I guess, represents one of the stories or whatever it is. So he's the host, and he tells the stories. But in any case, the second segment of that film is with Stacy Keach.
Yes.
And Stacy Keach is also a man who is losing his hair, and he is very concerned about this, of course, and there's this miracle cure advertised on television. He goes for it, and in his story, it turns out that the hair they're actually like alien worms or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but something horrifying obviously ends up happening. But it is very funny. I mean, when Stacy Keach has his hair, obviously he makes a Samson joke, and obviously he's got, like, when he has his hair, he's got the long hair, like, combed back, and just like the mane sort of cascading down. And
why do you want hair? There are certain advantages to being bald, Richard.
Well, that may be so, Doctor, but I want hair. I want lots of hair.
Much like Homer at when the next morning when he wakes up and it's just he has this gigantic mane of hair like Mel Gibson in Braveheart, and he's just
I know. Yeah, it's very impressive. I mean, especially since we're so used to seeing Homer so bald, and I don't know if this was the first time we had seen him with any kind of hair. I don't know if they had done a flashback episode yet to this point, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely a very thick and luxurious head of hair, and you can definitely see why Marge is much more excited to be around him, and why even her sisters are much more accepting of Homer.
Yes, well, I mean, this whole thing where all of a sudden Homer, the same dude, same guy, it's not like he got ripped or anything like that. He's still, a kind of tubby dude, but he's got a full head of hair now, and he shows up the next morning with like his sideburns, and yeah, the sisters are drooling over him, and he and Marge. The implication is that he and Marge are getting frisky. I mean, they're getting frisky 24/7.
Yeah.
It's very exciting in the Simpsons household.
Mom and Dad have been smooching again.
There's so many great bits, in this one, and even before he wakes up and has the revelation of all the hair. I love when he goes to the shopping center to first of all, I love the fact that there's a hair clinic in the mall. That's a great bit right there. But then I also love the fact that the doctor at the hair clinic is himself bald.
And you're pointing it out, and it had not occurred to me. You're absolutely right. He hawks the product, but clearly he doesn't care for it, or doesn't care to use it himself. And to your point about the thing about the secret hair clinic in the mall. So again, this is speaking from experience as a follically challenged human being. Obviously, when the problem began, and before I decided the hell with it and just decided to just lop it all off rather than wait for it to fall off. So at that point, I was just like, I obviously looked into this. And yes, I mean, it's not like they're in malls, but they are secret locations. When you look it up, like when you go online or wherever it is, they never tell you where it is. They just sort of, you write an email or whatever it is, you send a thing, and it's only when you get the appointment that they send you the address where it is. Now, I don't know, maybe in some places it is located in some mall somewhere, but it was my experience the two times that I checked this out for two different things, they were always in like a building in Midtown Manhattan. It was always near Fifth Avenue or near Lexington Avenue, like in a huge building, and you just like, and it was not advertised, obviously. You walk in there and I go, it's rather odd that they don't, why don't they, like, there's no shame in this. There shouldn't be any shame in this. Like, I don't really understand why it's treated like this secret thing, like you're going to some secret meeting or.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know why it would be. I mean, there's literally doctors for every type of problem imaginable. I don't know why hair doctors would be any different, really. I don't see what the problem would be.
This was me before Bosley, and this is me now. It's my natural hair. It's never going to look like that again.
It is funny, and it's not realistic in the sense that it's never that simple. You right. If it's here the thing is, basically what he's doing is he's purchasing Minoxidil. And here in the Simpsons version, it's called Demoxenil, right?
Right.
So it's obviously basically an anagram of Minoxidil. It's advertised as a much more elaborate cure, whereas my experience with that. So full disclosure. So I went to I believe it was Bosley Medical. Bosley Medical was the one that I tried out.
I remember the ads for that one. Yes.
Because, if I was going to do this, I did want to try to do it in a way that was natural. I wasn't going to wear a rug. Sure. I was going to, so I said, okay, let's find out what this is all about. What the hell? But it's, it's not that simple. You walk in there, you make the appointment. It's like you're going to the doctor's office. They walk you in, they sit you down in this waiting room, and in the waiting room, there's this big TV that basically runs the same ad that you saw on late night cable that made you come here in the first place. So it's like, why am I watching this ad again? It's like, I'm already here. You don't need to convince me to come. I'm already here. And then so like once I'm in there, and then, they obviously do this and that, and they ask you questions, they measure your head, etc. Okay, so in any case, it's a big process, and Minoxidil is simply an element of it. It's more like, well, this is how it would work, and we'll put you on treatment so that and you're taking the Minoxidil. This is how it works. So you can buy it from us, or you can buy it from here, or whatever it is. And the idea of it is that it's supposed to prevent further hair loss while you're in treatment and getting the plugs, right?
Okay.
So it's not this thing where you just put it on your head and hair will miraculously grow. I mean, in theory, it's supposed to prevent further loss and also make some hair grow, but that's never been entirely proven. And so,
Now, is that still sold? I mean, I remember when that was kind of a big thing, and I'd always see the ads for it. But do they still even sell that?
I really don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. But my point is, it was all part of a treatment. It wasn't this miracle thing that they say here, where he just walks into the store and the guy gives him a bottle, a massager, or this thing, and boom, and that's it. It's just overnight. You just.
So there were no gravity boots.
No gravity boots, no massager. I mean, these things do exist. These kinds of products do exist. And maybe in some places they offer them to you for you to waste your money on that. But in any case, it's just funny to me. But the going back, what I find funny and I find accurate is the whole, the secretiveness of it. Go back to that. That to me is what makes it very funny. And then the second part is the whole, the part that they do satirize about it, though, is how important hair can be to a man's body image.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the hair that basically gives Homer his new promotion. So I mean, obviously, it makes quite a big difference in his life right away. Goes from being, one of the nuclear reactor grunts to right fast-tracked into an executive slot with Mr. Burns.
Right. It's a token promotion that they do every year, right? That's the whole thing. And it's just so funny how first you have the aspect of obviously Marge finding him more sexually attractive. Although I think part of that is also that he displays a certain confidence in himself, which now makes him more, he feels more attractive, so therefore he's more aggressive in that sense.
Who is that young go-getter?
Well, it sort of looks like Homer Simpson, only more dynamic and resourceful.
But it is pretty hilarious. He ascends, right, and kind of gets an executive position. And here we come to what is probably the centerpiece of the episode, which is Harvey Fierstein.
Oh, yes, as Karl.
I think Karl's a wonderful character, and it's really unfortunate that he didn't come back in future episodes.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think there's probably a lot that they could have done with Karl in future episodes. I honestly, when I started watching this one, I totally even forgot about that whole character and kind of that whole subplot of the male secretary. But yeah, he's very funny, and he's a very good fit for this character, no doubt about it.
It's an unusual. This is 1990, so we're not quite there. There had been gay characters on mainstream television. There had been, but still to see it in a cartoon show and to see it portrayed in such a he's a gay character. But they don't really make a point of that. They don't.
No.
It's there. It's understood and it's there, and they don't make an issue of it and they don't make a point of it. Yeah. And they don't even try to conceal it or anything. It's, I think Matt Groening was, after the show first aired, when the episode first aired, obviously he was asked because they had cast an openly gay actor to play this character.
Right.
And there's so many overtones that the character is clearly gay. And they went and they asked Matt Groening, is he gay? And his response was, he's whatever you want him to be. Right. Which just seems like kind of a dodgy sort of response. Must have just go ahead and just own it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that was kind of the way that people had to answer those questions in 1990. So, it's kind of a weak response right there.
And I'm just a big fool.
Oh, no, you're not.
How do you know?
Because my mother taught me never to kiss a fool.
Another thing that he gets to do, now that he's an executive, now that he's, rising in the ranks, he now gets to go to the executive bathroom.
Oh, right.
That sequence is pretty funny. But I especially like the first thing when they show you the bathroom, the normal bathroom, is a remarkably hideous bathroom.
Yeah, it looks like pretty much your worst gas station bathroom is what the employees for the power plant are having to deal with. It does not look like a very serene environment.
It looks like something out of a dive bar, It is. But then he gets to the executive bathroom, and that whole sequence is just hilarious. I mean, first you have like Burns coming out, walking down the marble staircase, talking about how last night he was watching the Dumont Network.
Yes.
I wonder if people understand that, like that. I didn't get it then.
Yeah, I mean, I just assume it's just one. I mean, I don't even know exactly what that is. I just assume it's kind of one of these old-timey TV terms, like the Colgate Comedy Hour and things like that. I just kind of chalk it up to one of those type of references.
Right. Well, the implication is that I guess he's watching the Dumont News Hour or something where they're like talking about, who does he talk about? He talks about Rommel, I think, or something.
Yes, he mentions the Desert Fox. He saw a documentary on the Desert Fox and how much he admired a Rommel. So kind of tells you where Mr. Burns' head's at.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and just brief data. The Dumont was an actual television network. It's just it was I think one of the first, if not the first, official American television network. And for a while there, they obviously ran a lot of programs. They started like in the 40s, before most people even had televisions.
Yeah.
In like the early 40s. And it existed till about the mid 50s, when other networks started popping up, and then just, and legendarily, I mean, they had a lot of great programming, but most of that programming was lost. Because when other networks came into the premises, rather than take their stuff into their library, they basically dumped it in the East River. Apparently, if anybody wants to deep dive, they could probably find the lost tapes, which are in containers. They're not just floating down there. And so there's a possibility that you could save the archives of the Dumont Network. Certain things were saved. I think only a couple hundred, like Honeymooners. Honeymooners was something that was originally on the Dumont Network. Yeah, and part of the reason why there's only 39 episodes is because I believe that those are the only ones that were preserved.
It's kind of, speaking about the early, kind of history of television, that kind of reminds me, I mean, it was not too long ago, I rewatched Network. Which I had not seen in a very long time, and there's a lot of stuff in that movie that I had kind of forgotten about. I mean, it's one of those movies that you mention it and everyone just thinks of,
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore.
And that's a great bit, but man, there's just so many good scenes in that movie, and so yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking of when I hear the Dumont Network.
Yeah, Network's a great movie, and you maybe want to revisit it. I'm gonna see if it's streaming anywhere so that I can watch it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I mean, it's crazy how the movie's now almost 50 years old, probably like 45 years old, and it's just crazy how relevant it is to kind of what's going on in the world today. It's definitely one that is I highly recommend checking it out again.
Yeah, those pre-shoot movies. I mean, there's quite a few of them, and you watch them now and you go, wow, these writers, these filmmakers were really ahead of the curve in seeing the world around them and kind of reading the tea leaves, as it were, and sort of seeing where we were going, because so much of that stuff's like, you know what, this is kind of what happened eventually. This is where we went. This is where we ended up. And it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I mean, that's a movie that, it's like it's kind of so associated with just one scene that I think so much of everything else has been kind of forgotten. And I mean, there's just an incredible scene in that movie where Ned Beatty has a huge monologue in a boardroom in that movie, and it's one of the most incredible monologues that you'll ever see in a film. And it's like Ned Beatty just kills it in this scene, and it's kind of like nobody really talks about it, but man, it's like one of the great sort of speeches that you'll ever see in a movie.
And you will atone.
It's unfortunate that Ned Beatty is kind of, I guess, forever kind of going to be thought of as the guy that gets buggered in Deliverance. And he's perfectly fine in the movie, and he's great in Deliverance too. But it's like, God, I mean, he really has some great chops. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. And Network is kind of a prime example of it.
I recently revisited the 1990s legal / serial killer thriller Just Cause. I don't know if you...
Yes, that's right. Yeah, with Sean Connery and Lawrence Fishburne.
And in that film, Ned Beatty has practically a bit part. I mean, he plays the defense attorney for Blair Underwood.
I mean, it's been forever since I've seen that, but I can still hear Sean Connery in the trailer.
Did you kill Joni Shriver? Did you kill her? Seek, and ye shall find.
It's not a very good movie, if we're being honest, but it's certainly watchable.
Yeah, I don't really remember it being that good. I'm trying to think of like recent Ned Beatty performances that I can recall, and I mean, I can't think of anything real recent, but I do remember him as the evil senator in Shooter.
In Shooter, he and Danny Glover. Yeah. No, there's this whole thing. There's a relationship to The Simpsons too, because like when all those government people are revealed, they're like in this cabin in the woods. They're all together, right, and they're all so evil. I mean, it reminded me of like in The Simpsons, the whole gentleman too evil. It was this incredible. They're so hilariously, cartoonishly evil in that movie. Yeah. That you wonder, I mean, I really enjoy that movie, but I guess it's part of the thing where let's make these bad guys so deeply, terribly, horribly corrupt and evil that they're practically twirling their mustaches on screen, so that when Mark Wahlberg gets to kill them all at the end, you're just cheering.
Did he give his checks and balances speech? This is about evidence and the truth.
And then you just said to him, fuck you.
And, a minute ago we were talking about Sean Connery, and that's actually what I was reminded of by with all of Homer's extravagant hairstyles. Because there is one interesting thing in this episode, and I think this was very deliberate. They really did this, where they said that every time you see Homer, in every scene, he was going to have different hairstyles, and always very interesting and
right.
And overdone, whether it's that cool thing with the sideburns he's got at the start, and then later at one point he's got like a cool pompadour going, or he's got like a long mane of hair, or he's got it like swept up into like a ponytail, so there's always like all these extravagant hairstyles, and obviously it brought to mind Sean Connery, but it more particularly brought to mind Bruce Willis, and
right.
Specifically, this in-joke that a friend of mine have had for years now, we refer to it as the Fantasies of Bruce Willis. The genesis of this is the film The Jackal.
Yes,
I imagine you've seen that. The
yes.
Not very good remake of Day of the Jackal, in which he played the Jackal.
Yeah, I don't think it's that bad, but
I mean, it's perfectly watchable, right? But the thing about that makes it interesting is that Bruce Willis, who we know is also, as I, refer to people, follically challenged in real life. But in this film, he's got one amazing hairstyle after another for all the different personas that he inhabits as a globetrotting assassin.
That's true.
Who's fighting against Irish Richard Gere.
Right. Yeah. That's the worst part of the film is Richard Gere. He's by far the weak link in the movie. But yeah, I do hear what you're saying, and with regards to Willis, and I mean that's kind of, I mean you can look at like his almost all of his movies for a certain point, where he was always kind of having these scenes where he had kind of flashbacks with, to characters that had hair, or he was playing some kind, like in Hostage. That movie opens with him kind of playing this kind of burned out hostage negotiator, and he's got like kind of a real scraggly look to him, and he's got kind of the hair in that. And so yeah, he's in general, I think in his movies he kind of likes to live out with the fantasy of still having hair.
Yeah, exactly. It's this sort of thing where it's sort of, we look at it, my friend and I look at it as a franchise, as a kind of secret franchise that's called the Fantasies of Bruce Willis. We could call the Jackal the initial installments, but then films subsequently have added to this franchise. You've got Bandits, and as you said, Hostage, and The Story of Us, and like a whole bunch of other movies where he's got, amazing hair that is obviously not real. But the point is that that's what it made me think of more than anything else. Just like, these hairstyles are amazing.
That's true. I mean, I think that's one of the funnier aspects of this episode is how much fun the animators are having with all the different hairstyles that Homer sports throughout the show.
And then it brings to mind what ends up happening. The climactic, the third act twist is, of course, that Bart very unfortunately destroys all of Homer's supply of Dimoxidil.
In his hopes to grow a very hep goatee to impress his friends.
Hey, what's happening, hip cats?
No way! It's gotta be a fake!
It's like Willisville, Daddy-O.
Something funny about that is like Bart wants to, his daydream of that is that he's going to look like a beatnik, essentially.
Yeah.
He's there with his bongo drums and
like you would well, I think that's pretty clever, because I mean you would think that it would just be Bart trying, he wants to be kind of a crazed, hairy biker kind of guy, or that would kind of be his fantasy. But yeah, him hoping to impress his friends by being a beatnik is a pretty clever piece of writing. And
it betrays the origins of the writers as like just the fact that it's a beatnik. Again, this speaks to 30 years ago. It's just funny that Bart, a 10-year-old kid in 1990, would fantasize about being a beatnik. It's just, to me, that's just very funny to me.
Yeah, that's and that his friends would be so impressed by that too. That's also pretty good stuff.
And so, because he wants to have a magical beard, he ends up destroying all of Homer's supply of Dimoxidil. And the thing about that is that it sort of tells you, wow, what a shitty product. So essentially you have to use it every day.
Right.
Or your all the hair that you've grown, just as miraculously as it appeared, it will go away.
But in fairness, if that was the deal, that you have to use this every night or it'll go away, I don't think it would hurt the sales of Dimoxidil if that was the reality. There'd be more than enough people willing to keep up with the daily use.
Yes, $1,000. God knows how much that supply is.
Right.
But one would imagine that it's at least a month or a couple of months. I mean, that they don't give any specifics on how much that bottle
That's
is.
true. We never really know exactly, or for that matter, how often you're supposed to wear the gravity boots either.
You're supposed to hang upside down. That's the other thing too. I wonder. It's every night, so I wonder, are you supposed to do that every night too? Go through that whole like hanging upside down like Michael Keaton in Batman.
Yeah.
And just like rubbing your head with
which that scene in Batman always kind of bugs me. I mean, I like that movie, but okay, so on two counts, you're Bruce Wayne and you're trying to maintain this cover of being Bruce Wayne, and so after you've made Whoopi with Kim Basinger, you're gonna now go ahead and basically hang out upside down in your palatial estate. I mean, if you're trying to keep your secret identity truly a secret, I don't know if that's really the smart way to play it. And then on the other hand, if you're Kim Basinger and you've come to Gotham City to investigate the Batman, and you wake up in the middle of the night and you see a man hanging upside down, I mean, you're not putting it together. I mean, I know that we have a suspension of disbelief, but that scene has always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But that's just me.
I could follow your logic because also, like, let's say this is part of his routine. Fair enough. Okay, but not only does he hang upside down, because he's got the Batcave. That mansion is gigantic. He could probably do that anywhere in that house, but he's doing it right in the bedroom.
Yeah,
right there, like where she could clearly see what's going on if she were to wake up in the middle of the night and see him doing that. And that's not a normal exercise routine. Nobody would think that. So and the whole thing about putting 2 and 2 together. I will say this. One of the things that to your point, one of the things that this whole quarantine has brought out is the fact that so many of us are out there now wearing masks. Okay.
Right.
But funnily enough, I mean, I live in La Paz is a city, but there's aspects. It's the neighborhood, whatever it is. So the point is, you going to the market every Friday morning, I will occasionally bump into people who are also wearing masks.
Yes.
But I will recognize who they are because I know them. So I'm going to see the top. I see the top of the top half of their face, their eyes, however they're dressed, their body language. I know them since I know them, so I can wave at them. Hey, how you doing? Bob or whatever. It makes me realize, okay, so here I can recognize my friend who is, or my acquaintance who's wearing a mask that covers half of his face, but I know who this person is. Okay. Meanwhile, Kim Basinger, or anybody for that matter, not only does she know Bruce Wayne, she's been intimate with him, she's been very close to him, so that really she can't recognize him, even though he's only got the top of his face covered. I mean, the bottom half, that jaw is very distinctive. The whole thing kind of comes out, it pops out. And quarantine time has sort of really made the whole superhero genre even more ridiculous than it always was.
Yeah, well, I'm waiting because, eventually when movies start to be filmed and TV shows start to be filmed is, what is going to be the first film or the first TV show that has the pandemic bank robbery where, the people enter the bank wearing just kind of the surgical masks and that's their cover to pull the bank heist. I'm kind of eager to see who's gonna jump on that first, because that just seems like a pretty obvious bank robbery plot line.
Perhaps who did this new movie, Extraction?
I think the director's name is Hargrave. I know he was a former stuntman.
That's right. He was actually the stunt coordinator on the Avengers movies.
Yeah, he's been around a stunt guy for a long time.
That movie was a huge success, so perhaps they would hand it over to him if they want to make some gritty action picture. I take it I think you didn't care for it. I heard somewhere you didn't care for Extraction.
Well, here was my thing is that, I mean, maybe it was just my mood when I was watching it, but look, I think the action is top notch. I mean, it's probably, in terms of just the look of the action, it's probably the best that Netflix has done so far. But maybe it might have just been my mood at the time, but it was just so dour and so glum. And, Hemsworth, he's just so, down on his luck, mercenary, and just with no real personality. And I that's kind of my problem with it. And I just really, I couldn't get into it as much as I would have liked to. I think, again, I thought the action was terrific. And if you just want to see, people getting shot in the head, then it's perfectly fine. But I really just could not get into Hemsworth's character and kind of just the whole setting of it. I just wasn't into it.
I can understand that. I enjoyed it personally, but I do think that I'll follow you there, where there's an element to it. It has a bleakness to it.
Yeah.
I appreciated, as you just said, the action sequences I think are fantastic.
Right.
I mean, a stunt coordinator put this thing together, and you can totally tell this is a guy who knows how to stage, how to block action scenes, how to make them really look exciting, because they do. And they look, I mean, to some people, either, I don't know if this was a positive or negative criticism, but they said, oh, it's like a video game. And I'm like, yeah, it is. It's like Uncharted. It's a third-person shooter cover-based shooter, like Chris Hemsworth's hiding behind buses and walls and popping out and shooting and whatever. But the action is really exciting. But I will say this, yes, in terms of it being like a fun summer action movie, there is a bleakness to it that that I think for some people could be a problem. And then and from that bleakness, the fact that the action is fantastic and all of that, but it is a hard R action flick. It's a very brutal, violent film.
Yeah, and normally that's kind of how I want my action.
Me too.
I don't want it watered down. I don't need the Hobbs and Shaw treatment where everything is just is so light that there's just no weight to any of it
and no stakes.
And it's like I said, I think the action is definitely the best part about it. And on that level, I was definitely into it, but it was just everything else. And it's like, I know that obviously you want to set up bad guys to be as bad as they can, but when you're like throwing kids off a roof, and I'm like, oh God, it's like it was just hard for me to really get to. It was hard for me to have a good time with the movie, and I think now that's kind of what I want out of an action film. I mean, not to say that, there's plenty of good, very serious action movies. I just think this one, it just didn't quite, the tone and the action did not mesh well for me.
I can understand that. When you were talking about Chris Hemsworth being sort of an embittered mercenary, his character, he's got a tragic past. And in a sense, he's got kind of a death wish too, because he's so in a sense, he's like Martin Riggs, but he doesn't have the charisma and wacky craziness that Mel Gibson brought to that character.
I'll make a deal with you, Arjun. Arjun, is that, or Aryan, or whatever the fuck your name is? I'll make a little deal with you. You fold up your tents and get the fuck out of my country, and I won't do anything to you. I'll leave you alone. Because if you stick around here, I'm gonna fuck your ass.
Okay, so at the end of the story, Homer loses his hair and now is essentially worthless in the eyes of the power plant. Here's something I wanted to get to about this episode. It ultimately has kind of it's a very sweet episode in the sense that the whole thing with Karl and trying to bring out the the whole message about how it was never the hair, it was always him, and the hair just gave him the confidence, but it was always, he's the one who actually had the talent to impress the people, and he never needed the hair, and so he doesn't need it now. That's the message. But the thing about it that's bitter is that, well, it turns out that he kind of does,
Exactly. Yes. He has to give his big speech to all the other executives, the power plants, the speech that Karl wrote. And, for all we know, it probably had lots of great ideas that could have, it made everyone at the power plant a great deal of money and had all sorts of great things. But since Homer's now bald, nobody really gives a shit.
This bald man has no ideas.
Some nerve telling us how to run the plant. He doesn't even have hair.
You talked about how the guy at the hair clinic in the mall is a bald man. Yes. The interesting thing is that, as you see the audience start to clear out halfway through, Homer's presentation, and then when they have a shot of the audience leaving, the first person to get up and leave is bald.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Another nice, clever gag, and it's a sad commentary on how Homer was being perceived at that point.
Yeah, self-image. It's a hell of a thing. But over here, the bitter message is not only self-image, but also the image that others have of you, the superficiality, the shallowness of society.
I will say though that as sad an ending for Homer in this episode, it is kind of nice that he has the scene with Mr. Burns, where Mr. Burns kind of gives us a little bit of his backstory and how he, at one point had flowing strawberry blonde locks. And I thought it was nice that we got that.
I too know the sting of male pattern baldness.
So what do we think of this episode? What's the verdict?
Oh, I think this is another winner. I mean, this is lots of great gags, a great guest star with Harvey Fierstein. Like I said, I think it's another one that kind of expands the universe because we get a lot of Mr. Burns, a lot of Smithers, and kind of what's going on at the nuclear power plant, so that we're not spending as much time with just the immediate Simpson family, and so for those reasons, I think this is definitely a grade A episode.
You start to see, we talk about the first season being kind of rough around the edges.
Yeah.
And you could say that throughout the second season, those growing pains still exist to some degree, yes. But you see a marked improvement almost right away. Like the first couple of episodes of the second season, and this one in particular, it is such a sharp, fun, deep episode. And even the animation is just better. The designs, the character designs, everything about it is just on a fresher. You see immediately an improvement. It's an immediate improvement.
Even just the voices, I think are. I mean, the voices that are being used, I mean, are pretty much as they were throughout the 90s. Whereas you couldn't really say that about the first season. But yeah, I think the show is definitely finding its groove at this point. And yeah, I think it's an excellent episode. Basically, it's a problem that, men could relate to before this one aired, and it's one that men could relate to even to this day. And I think there's a lot of the jokes still land pretty well.
Homer Simpson is innocent. Mr. Simpson was unaware of any impropriety. I take full responsibility.
Well, then you're fired, whoever you are. Hey, what do you care if this guy's bald?
My reasons are my own.
Yeah, I mean, this was a fantastic talk, man. I want to thank you. We had a great time. The second season is off to a terrific start, and it was great to have you here. And you'll be back in a few weeks. We're going to be talking about your next episode is the one about cable TV, Homer versus Lisa and the Eighth Commandment, which is a classic as well. Yeah, so it's been great, man.
I appreciate it. Definitely having a lot of fun, experiencing these episodes again. Really haven't seen these in a very, very long time, so it's been a blast kind of checking them out and kind of seeing how well some of the humor is held up over these 30 years.
Yeah, and one thing that I think we're seeing is that it has held up like really well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Testament to how good this show really was when it was in its prime.
It's I mean, from the get-go, I mean, even though, like we said, the first season was a little rocky, I think it's at least through the ones that I've rewatched with you now, they've been frankly hilarious, and I'm kind of surprised how much I've been enjoying them, because I kind of thought that sometimes when you go back to watch some of these things, from way back in the day, it's like they just don't quite have that same impact. But I think these early Simpson episodes are definitely standing the test of time.
Absolutely. It's going to be really fun to keep going through these to this season. And
for sure.
I'll be looking forward to our next chat.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks for having me on.
So that's it for this week's installment of the Simpsons Countdown. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this, please give us a like. If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe. If you have a minute, a brief review might actually help boost the podcast's profile on whatever platform you're listening to it on. And if it isn't too much trouble, please do share this with all your friends, both virtual and actual, on social media. Your support by spreading the word is much appreciated. I'm Erix Antoine, and I'll be back next Thursday evening to talk about the very first Treehouse of Horror. And I'll actually have 3 guests on hand to discuss that in detail, so I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. I hope you'll join us. And until then, stay safe. Please continue taking care of yourselves and each other, and practicing social distancing, because we're all in this together, and we're not out of the woods just yet. Thank you for listening. See you next week.
We are America's #1 hair restoration expert, and we specialize in delivering affordable, life-changing... Shh.